Hello, thanks for tuning in. I'm Jim Roger.
I'm Kyle Dayton.
I'm Edward T. Martin.
And you're watching The Cutting Edge, Revealing the Truth. Remember, this is the show where you don't just hear them, but you actually get to see and experience the guest. Speaking of guests, by the way, tonight on our show we have a man named Ralph Ring. Ralph comes to us via pre-recorded videotape. And Ralph is now an elderly gentleman. He's in his 70s. But when he was a young man back in the 50s, late 50s and early 60s, he was involved with some very interesting things that we're going to talk about tonight and also on our next show to come as well. Ralph Ring was a research assistant and a technician for Otis T. Carr. Well, who's Otis T. Carr? Let's take another step. Otis T. Carr was a protege of Nikola Tesla. He spent many years with him, and after Nikola Tesla had died, Otis T. Carr had carried on with the research of the Tesla technology and making it aware in the world. And so for that reason, to give you serious and honest researchers out there the whole story, we're not going to just pick out the sound bites and shoot through this stuff. We're going to give you all the information, everything that Ralph knew about Otis T. Carr. They built the OTC-X1 spacecraft, a flying disc that actually flew, had counter-rotating magnetic fields. The outer body shells were dielectrically opposed to each other, like a highly charged capacitor. So again, this is a two-part show. We're going to get through all that technical stuff. But first, before we do, we'll find out more about Ralph Ring in his early years and come up through his life. But before we do that, let's go to Ed Martin with a news story of interest that he has for us.
I very briefly wanted to mention some material about levitation because Ralph Ring talks about that quite a bit. And this levitation story, it comes from the website of Linda Moulton Howell, earthfiles.com. At the top of the website, mother and son watched cow rise into golden orange beam floating up to disk. And this is a fascinating compilation of material that Linda Moulton Howell has put together about her almost 30 years now of research about cattle mutilations, cattle abductions, mysterious phenomena about cattle and other animals. And one of the interesting things that she has at her website is some interview material with our friend Dr. Leo Sprinkle of Laramie, Wyoming. And there's a fascinating account there that Leo is describing a very interesting case, this case in the headline about a mother and son, and one of their cattle on their ranch was being levitated. They went out to try to intervene and they got floated up and had their own abduction experience. And Leo describes it, interviewing them and so on. So it's fascinating material. And I just thought I'd briefly mention also for anyone listening who is interested about how to get in touch with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, even if they can't travel to Laramie, Wyoming, Leo's office phone number is area code 307-721-5125. And he is very easy to talk with. Anybody who would like help with UFO experience, missing time, and so on can get in touch with Leo.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Thank you so much for that report. Very interesting. I met Dr. Sprinkle a number of times up there at different conferences. Well, as we alluded to earlier, our guest, Ralph Ring, a research assistant to Otis T. Carr, who was a Tesla protege, worked very closely with him in the development of a 45-foot diameter flying disc that was actually flown. But we'll work our way up to that. First, let's find out a little bit about Ralph. Ralph Ring, in our first clip, we'll find out a little bit about his early years in the beginning of his life.
And continued my diving, and I met my first wife. We got married and had a couple of children, and I continued my diving. But it became more and more hazardous. I had to go deeper and deeper and further and longer away from home. And so I was out diving one day, and a dive boat pulled up alongside of us, and it happened to be a dive boat from U.S. Divers, which was Jacques Cousteau's company that produced the Aqualung. And they asked, they had heard about my research and development in diving and what I was doing, and asked me if I'd like to join their team. So I said yes, and I became one of their research and development divers, a technician in the R&D department at U.S. Divers. Later on, because of my curiosity of inventive nature, I invented a lot of different things and modified a lot of different things. They asked me if I would like to be on the West Coast in Calypso 2 as a head diver, which I consented to and was looking forward to it, but it was years away and I didn't realize that. Well, in the interim, we were going out and testing different equipment. My job at that time was a wraparound mask, and it was kind of hazardous. I'd had some harrowing experiences out in deep water, and my wife got real nervous, and she said that I was raising 2 kids without a dad, and they would like me to be home more often. So I came home one day, and she had an ad on the kitchen table and said, "Read this before you're not going to get any breakfast till you read this." And I took a look at it, and it was an ad for a research and development technician, a lab tech, at a place called Advanced Kinetics in Costa Mesa, California. And I said, well, I don't have any credentials. I don't have that kind of background. And she said, well, your interest in nature and your tinkering and everything you do, go down there and see if they'll, if there's anything you can do. Well, I did. I went down there. It was lunchtime. Everybody was out to lunch. I went by the director's office, who was Dr. Weinhardt, and he asked me what I was doing there. I said I was looking for a job. He said, well, come in, sit down, and asked me for my credentials. I said, no, when I was in physics class, they were teaching at that particular day about bumblebees couldn't fly aerodynamically, and I looked out the second floor of the classroom, and there was a bumblebee looking me square in the eye. So I had to go back to nature. I was raised in the woods. My sister and I used to walk 7 miles round trip to school every day, so I got quite familiar with natural law. Anyway, I left the conventional sciences and went back into the woods and started learning more about natural law. I ran into eventually a person by the name of Arthur Aho, who wrote a book, Tomorrow's Energy Need Not Be Fuel, which explained to me that it's true, hummingbirds and bumblebees don't fly per se, they levitate. And he explained this to me by showing me that next to the larynx there was a hollow cavity, and as the bumblebee in this case beated its wings, it would reach the resonance frequency of its surroundings and would free itself from the gravitational field. They actually levitate. And to go into this a little further, he explained that the Earth is vibrating at 8.5 cycles per second, and once you reach that resonant frequency, you're no longer captivated by gravity. So anyway, I got really involved with that, and then when I told Dr. Weinhardt I was looking for a job, I told him of my interest in lizards and birds and bees, and said I don't have the academic background, and he said no. And I had told him my main interest in life was magnetics, and that seemed to turn on a switch with him, because just a week before his technician or engineer that was working on a magnetic project left the facility. So he said, well, you come to work tomorrow morning, you're going to go on the magnetic thing, and I hadn't even filled out an application.
You know, it's
But I
amazing
did.
how many of the, I guess, serendipitous synchronicities went along with Ralph Ring choosing
Yeah.
the path that he took, and he was aware enough to pay attention to the little, to the powers
of
that these
nature.
hints. Exactly. So what would have happened had he not been so observant?
Yeah, Tesla had that same love for nature, didn't he?
I
Yeah.
believe so. Yes.
Yeah. I got a kick out of the fact that his wife wouldn't give him breakfast unless he
Right.
looked at the wand. And you know, diving's a pretty dangerous
Yeah.
trade to be involved with on an
Yes.
everyday basis, because you can get hurt down there so easily. You can get hit by something, a fish or something aggressive, or an equipment malfunction. So, okay, moving right along. We've got a lot to show tonight. So, in the second clip, we're going to learn a little bit more about the background of his first high-tech job. So, if we're ready, let's go ahead and roll that second clip, please.
My job I had a workbench, I had an oscilloscope with a high-speed camera and a cathode ray tube that would fire electrons, and my job was to get the electron all the way through the field without deflection, either negative or positive. And so I thought this was an exciting job, and I was getting paid for it. My wife was happy and I was happy. But after a while, I realized that I was doing the same thing over and over, and I wasn't getting the electron through the field. And so they said, don't worry, keep increasing the power of the force, and don't worry about it. Well, it got it got a little boring after a while, but I started thinking I can do better than this. I know I can. And then I looked around the facility. It was a big research lab. They were working on levitation. They were using giant coils and levitating steel balls for about 48 minutes, and they'd burn out a coil and have to go get another one, and they were spending thousands of dollars a day on their experiments, as was I on mine, of taxpayers' money that wasn't really getting us anywhere. So, and we were working on other things. We had lasers that we were working with. We were working on teleportation. So anyway, I went home, and I had always been a garage sailor, if you will, a collector of my wife called it junk. To me, it was treasures. And I put things together and tried to do different things. And I took a television apart, got the cathode ray tube out, set up an experiment with magnets, and knew from my affiliation with nature there was a simpler way to do what they were trying to do. And instead of forcing the electrons, I pulsed it, which means I allowed it to do its own thing, and it spiraled through the field and got all the way through the field on the first try and the second, and up 20 or 30 tries later I was still getting it all the way through the field. So I was very happy about this. I took pictures and I wrote up the experiment exactly how I did it and the components that I used.
It's interesting to me how that he just described how that instead of trying to force the electrons through, he was pulsing it through using a spiraling motion.
Yeah.
And again, that succeeded. And it's as though he was trying to do things in a natural rather than a forced way.
You know, that makes sense too, because I would think if with a steady stream of electrons, what they were using with in the beginning, other things envelop around, have enough time to envelop around it. Or if it's pulsed and you know, also spiraled, then it gives it more opportunity for other things to cling on to it, to slow it down, less inertia.
And in another interview, he had mentioned that brute force with nature doesn't work. You know, you can't force nature to do certain things. You have to go with nature to get it to cooperate or get it to do what you want it to do, and learn how to work that way. It's interesting, paying attention to nature.
Yeah.
Again.
Oh yeah, that was one of his main loves in life, was the natural sciences. You know. Okay, in our next clip, Ralph made a very interesting discovery, and I think this is one of the discoveries that really got him moving in the direction that he ultimately wound up in. So, if we're ready, let's go ahead and roll that clip, please.
And then I took a 15-inch woofer speaker and put it on my living room floor, and I had an audio amplifier that I bought for 35 or 45 or 50 bucks, and I kept increasing acoustically. I was trying to levitate, and I kept increasing the frequencies in this cone, which would vibrate, until I could get something suspended. And I finally wound up with a ping pong ball perfectly suspended in this acoustical field of energy. It was levitating. And I pushed it down, it'd come right back up and wanted to stay there. Well, this was 2 or 3 in the morning. My wife said, you better get to bed if you're going to go to work. And I left it. I woke up in the morning and it was still there. So I took pictures and wrote up that experiment. Took it into Dr. Weinhardt thinking, I'm going to get a raise. I'm finally going to make a mark in this life worthwhile to help accelerate things. Well, I took it into Dr. Weinhardt. I showed him what I'd done. I showed him the photographs and everything. And he told me to shut the door and sit down. He stopped the phone calls and he said, yeah, Ralph, he said, I didn't think you were going to get that far with this, but he says, I know. And he's a very, very, he was a PhD. He was a very, very well-respected physicist in his own rights, and he was a German scientist. He said, Ralph, I know it's that simple, and that's how natural law works, but you know, you're working in a government-funded research facility here, and everything we do, we get paid for. And I said, yeah, but I said, no, you don't understand. We're paid to look for answers, not necessarily find them. And that blew me completely out of the water. I couldn't believe what the heck he was saying. But so I said, but he said, no. He said, we're not there yet. Maybe in 1,000 years or 100 years we'll be there, but I'm going to have to shred this. I'm going to have to tell you to be quiet and go back to work, because this is not what we're doing here. We don't get paid for that. So he shredded it. He put it in a shredder and shredded it up and stuff. And I went back to work, but 2 weeks later I was going to sleep on the job almost. I was so bored with it because I knew there was an easier way, a simpler way. It cost very, very little money. And I was kind of wasting their time and mine. Well, not their time, I guess, but mine.
And I thought it was interesting, too, that when Ralph Ring did this electron-related experiments at home, he used what he picked up at garage sales, basically. And I guess this could be duplicatable by viewers at home if you're so inclined. He had an audio amplifier, a frequency generator, and a cathode ray from an old TV set, and he put those together and did the electron work, and he just gave them a little pulse, and the electrons started the circular motion and started doing their thing. So I imagine that what he did with his own homemade setup, you could duplicate yourself, or someone at home could if they're so inclined, and continue his research as well.
Yeah, there's the old Tesla Society, which I was a member of, and they had a monthly magazine with all kinds of experiments, different experiments from Tesla.
Cool.
And one of the ones that I did, and it worked successfully, is you can take a long vertical wire, the longer the better, and put a balloon on it so it goes up vertically, and you can attach it to what we call in the trade a full wave rectifier bridge, and charge a capacitor with it, and it's like a storage battery, and it's free energy, and you can do that anywhere on Earth, at low levels. But it really works. One other thing too is in this clip we just watched, Ralph talked about levitating a ping pong ball, taking a woofer speaker, and once you find the right frequency, whatever's resonant with that ball, it'll just sit there suspended. And he went to bed that night, got up the next morning,
Yeah.
it was still there.
And this was without any audible sounds.
Yeah, I think it was
up
beyond
so
the
high.
human,
Yes.
beyond the human hearing range, I think. Yeah.
And the next morning he woke up with the ping pong ball was still levitating. That's amazing. Actually, it's not amazing, I guess, if you understand the laws of science or the laws of nature. You work with it.
Yeah.
And it's not a miracle.
It's fascinating that he was told by his superior, Dr. Weinhardt, to basically forget about what he'd found. In other words, that being told we're paid to look for answers, not to find answers.
Sad.
That sounds like a government job.
Yes.
And that's kind of sad.
Yes, even when Nikola Tesla invented the first radio remote controlled object, which was a boat, and a boat in the water, and he demonstrated this in front of scores and scores of people, nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody wanted to follow through in it. You know, it's very sad. And some people thought it was the work of the devil in those days, and they were just really afraid of it, didn't understand it, didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And as soon as Tesla's patents for remote control expired, then this country and the government started making remote control things in 1918. Now, how convenient is that?
Yeah, you know, people tend to be afraid of what they don't know or understand. You know, and that's a normal human tendency. I remember Pat Robinson, the preacher. Remember him? He said, anybody believes in UFOs is with the devil.
And should be stoned to death. He actually said it. Well, even with Edison, when Tesla first came to him with his AC research and alternate current, even Edison thought it was basically from the devil. But then years later, Edison admitted that the one big mistake that he made in his life was not following through with Tesla's AC research, and how he failed with sticking with his direct current or DC research instead of going with Tesla's
That's
research.
Right. And if they would have followed Edison's advice in the beginning, he was dead wrong. The wires going cross country on the power lines, you know, if they were DC in those days, they would have to be as big as your leg in diameter to conduct that much current, you know. But with AC, you can transform it up to a very high voltage, low current. Low current, that means smaller conductor for very long distances. And when you get where you're going with, you transform it back down to that low voltage. And Tesla was entirely right about that. So they had a big feud about that. And as it turns out, Tesla was 100% right. And by the way, Tesla was the very first person to transmit radio signals across the Atlantic Ocean, everybody.
Yes, and not Marconi. And the Supreme Court ruled that it was Tesla and not Marconi. And when people tried to come through since then with to try to get a patent on the patent office would remind them, no, Tesla did this, when they wouldn't really recognize Tesla at the time. So, you know, it's, what can you do?
I think people really tried to vilify Tesla, from what I understand. And Tesla was not someone who was greedy or trying to make profit for himself, but he was really vilified.
Yeah, he was good. You know, it's sad. He died, 85 or 86 years old, as a lonely old man.
Penniless.
Yeah, and the day he died, though, I think it was the FBI went straight into his apartment and picked up every drawing or every scrap of information they could get their hands on.
And
At
some
the
of his
hotel
stuff
in New York City.
Yeah.
And some of his is still some of what he created or his plans are still considered classified.
Yeah, but you see, but all during this time, Otis T. Carr was with Tesla, his protege, and was quite enforced. Is that the word? Energized by what he was witnessing Tesla do, in other words. So, okay. By now, though, getting back to Ralph Ring, he's getting bored with his job now. It's time to move on, and so he finds a new home, and we'll find out more about that. So, if we're ready, let's go ahead and roll that next clip, please.
So I got discouraged, and I started talking to some friends of mine that led me to some other people that were having weekly meetings called Understanding. That was the name of the group. It was created by a person by the name of Daniel Fry out of the Southern California area. And all it was a group of people brainstorming or coming together and trying to understand how things work and how things don't work. I told them of my experiments, and I told them of my interest in magnetism, and my sole interest in life was to see us have floating homes. This has always been my goal, always been my my mission, if you will, to see that like from the Flintstones to the Jetsons, that we could take everybody and have a self-sufficient home that would take care of itself. No meters, no electric bills, no watering bills, no nothing. Everything would be self-contained in these floating homes. And when I said that, they said, well, you know, there's a guy out in Norman, Oklahoma. His name is Otis Carr. That's been working on a similar thing. He calls them spacecraft, and but he sounds like the same thing you're working on. He's having trouble back there because people are having trouble believing him, and he's having all kinds of problems. And we've asked him to come out and talk with you. You know, would you be? You know, I said, sure, that'd be great. So they moved him from Norman, Oklahoma out to Southern California, and we got acquainted real fast. He had an entourage of about 7 or 8 engineers and PR people, and he had a regular group of people, and him and I just couldn't stop relating to each other. And as he'd teach me some natural laws, I'd teach him some that I'd picked up. So we were a natural. We could talk all night long and never get tired. So the people in understanding said, you know, they're not very happy with Carr because he's trying to get what he was calling free energy out to people, where energy that has always been here in abundance, and somehow humans found a way to put meters on it and charge people for it, and they call this a monetary system. And he said it's not necessary. He had learned from Nikola Tesla, who he was a disciple of for about 3 years, that you can stick a pole in the ground 30 feet and in the air 30 feet and get all the electricity out of the air that you want. We live in a whole sea of energy all around us. There's no need to put meters on it. No need to ever pay for it. It's free.
A couple of things that I found fascinating about what Ralph just said. One is that he mentioned about a research group that was led by Daniel Fry, and I wonder if that might be the same Daniel Fry who had a UFO experience at White Sands, New Mexico in the 1950s, but it might be. And that was a fascinating case. And then another thing that I found really interesting in this last clip was that the statement by Nikola Tesla, we live in a sea of energy, and that something as simple as a 30-foot pole going up in the air and extending down into the ground, something that simple could tap into limitless electricity, and there'd be no meter. We wouldn't have to pay for it. It's fascinating.
What's the famous story about when he went to J.P. Morgan and told him about the free energy and how he could do it? Or was it J.P. Morgan?
It was J.P. Morgan.
And J.P. Morgan says to him, well, that's great, but how are we going to put a meter on it?
Yeah, and then he pulled his funds, and the whole project collapsed after that, and Tesla was broke.
I think J.P. Morgan made some statement, we're never going to let them milk our cow for free.
Yeah.
In other
Like he
words,
thought it was his.
right, like he thought it was his.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I met Ralph Ring about 10 years ago in a think tank group that I was involved with up in Phoenix, Arizona. And Ralph came in there for a number of times and talked about his dream was to create these floating homes, levitated homes to live in.
Yes.
And so we talked about that. And at the time, we wanted to find a place, a location to do what Otis T. Carr had done, because Ralph had all of the drawings and information and so forth. But just one other thing on levitation. On our website right here, on the top of our page, there's a little YouTube you can click on, and it's titled Free Energy, John Hutchinson. Now, John Hutchinson is a guy that is doing something very similar to what Tesla did during the Philadelphia experiment. He's taking 2 different radio frequency fields, projecting it at a device, and it levitates. And if you go to our website, ufoshows.com, you can actually see that happen by clicking on that. So it's, and John Hutchinson's been doing this for a long time. And And
They call it
he's-
the Hutchison effect, right?
That's right. And in fact, they've tried to shut him down a couple of times too. But he's quite a guy. He's quite eccentric. You know, if we do have a moment, why don't I just show you a couple of these images here on number 2, I guess. This is the first one. This is the 45-foot diameter craft that was built. This is the about 3.5-foot diameter model they built. This is Otis T. Carr talking with someone else, I don't know who, and that's him again. So I have another, hold the camera shot there, and they even had a billboard. Here we are, I'm trying to level, there we are, everything's backwards here. They even had a billboard on the highway. See the OTCX1 on there? It was T. Carr and Associates, and they have a list of states along the bottom of the billboard here where they were planning on bringing it, but of course that was confiscated by the government. We'll learn more about that in the second show. And I have another image. Hold the camera, please. We have, here's another image of the 45-foot diameter craft, people walking by it. Okay, I'm trying to hold that. You got a good focus on that, best you can get? Yeah, that's good. Okay, now hold that. Got another one. Giving George a workout here. And here's another one of the 45-foot diameter craft. It was still under construction, and see the ribs and all that there. So this was while they were still building it. And I've got one more. This is the model, the prototype they built first and flew. This is the one they demonstrated to General Motors. And boy, that's a story in itself. We'll talk about that in the second show as well. So that's good, Judge. Thanks. You can back up. Thank you very much, Judge. So there was a lot going on there. This project isn't a fairy tale. It was for real. I mean, this was something that really happened. And it gets more and more interesting as we go on. In our next clip, Otis T. Carr finds a new home for his project because they were getting real serious with the project by this time. And it just couldn't work where they were at the time in Oklahoma. So they moved from Oklahoma to somewhere else, and we'll find out where. So if we're ready to roll that next clip, let's go ahead and roll that clip, please.
One of the people had a cabin up at Lake Arrowhead, which is in Southern California, up above Riverside, near Victorville, California, and said, you guys go up there for a while, we'll find you a place where you can work, because that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to produce some, by that time I was calling them spaceships, spacecraft. And so we did. We went up and got real acquainted, and we got into very, very deep areas of science and what Carr was calling ether technology, which is things work without force. There's absolutely, the minute you try to force something, you're going to run into problems. It will never work successfully with force. So by that time, and to make the story shorter again, they had found us a laboratory just on the backside of Lake Arrowhead in a valley, the Victorville Valley, in a place called Hesperia or Apple Valley. They had a laboratory that was given to us mysteriously by the people that owned it, because they were interested in our technology and what we were trying to do. So we moved down there. We set up, we had everything there. We had a warehouse, we had the research lab, we had offices, machine shop, everything necessary. And we went down and started working day and night. And we had, there were several things we were working on, but my favorite was the spaceship. And we had a small 3-foot model that we were working with, and Carr said, well, come in, I want you to see this and realize what's going on here. We're going to go outside of the, and he was calling it the box in those days. He said conventional science hasn't gotten there yet, but I want to show you where we're at.
You know, this was the type of project, you know, it was way ahead of its time scientifically. So in order to get anything done, they had to isolate themselves, keep it concealed, keep it private, because once the general public would have found out what they were trying to do, they'd have been all over them. I don't think, you know, they may have never accomplished it, but they did. So they really did have to keep something like that under wraps, I think, you know, in order to get it completed. And then when he got it completed, his plan was to fly the thing everywhere, all over, and demonstrate it at low level, not above 500 feet, but just a few hundred feet off the ground everywhere, so he didn't interfere with normal air traffic, not violating those laws either, you know. So it was quite a deal.
It's interesting to me that this kind of research is a real part of our American history, and yet we're not taught about this in schools. The grade school children are not taught about this kind of research.
You know what else is sad? Half the kids don't even know who Nikola Tesla is.
That's right. Who is Tesla?
You know, Edison gets all the credit. In fact, Edison hired, when Tesla first came to this country, I think from Croatia, I think, Edison told him, if you can solve these problems for me, he had some things he was stuck on. He says, I'll give you $50,000. And Tesla solved the problems. Edison never paid him.
Right.
And that's when the rift started. And then he went to Herbert W. Westinghouse. Came
George
to him.
Westinghouse.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he said, I have some problems. If you can solve them, I'll pay you $50,000. And he didn't pay him right away. It was years later, because I guess his conscience bothered him. And finally, they wound up on somewhat friendly terms again. But Tesla was right about alternating current. He solved a lot of problems for Edison and Westinghouse. But he's really a technical unsung hero.
That's true. That's true. Concerning Edison, if I remember correctly, I think at one time Edison used to have dogs killed, electrocuted, trying to show the dangers of alternating current.
Dogs, horses, and an elephant.
And an
Hired,
elephant.
yeah, they hired a man named Harold Brown.
Yeah.
I think it was Harold Brown, to work with him to show the dangers of alternate current. So I saw this old footage of an elephant actually being electrocuted. You could see the smoke coming out of its feet, and then it just collapsed.
Any
just
kind
to
of
show the danger. That's
I'm a retired electrician. Any kind of current's dangerous, right, Judge? It doesn't matter if it's alternating or direct. When you get it, if it's high enough and it hits you in the right place, you're history.
that's correct.
Very good. Okay, in the next clip, Ralph talks about the prototype model, the one I just showed you, the 3.5-foot diameter one, and the very first time that was operated, and what some of the effects were. So, if we're ready, let's go ahead and roll that clip, please.
And we fired this model up. Gee, I should have brought a picture of it this morning. I'm sorry I didn't. It looked like a conventional spaceship, or a flying saucer, if you will. And we fired it up, and I had touched the top of the craft. It was made out of polished aluminum, and it was nice and solid. But I could feel the hum. I could feel, the vibrations. Well, they kept increasing the frequency, the vibration, similar to what I did with the ping pong ball. And pretty soon, as I was touching it, it got soft, and got softer and softer till I could stick my fingers right through the aluminum top of the craft. And it was a phenomenal experience. I can't really describe it because I can't relate it to anybody that hasn't been there. It's quite simple, and it didn't blow me away, because in that state of mind it was, oh yeah, that's simple. I guess I wasn't thinking. Well, that was my exposure to the deep space of, if you will, of etheric sciences, etheric technologies.
Did he mention where he was able to put his hand in the
Yeah.
in the material and and basically
In the
pull it
top
back
of the
up?
craft.
Lost its
Yeah.
molecular density.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But you know, everything in creation is, is created of atoms, and atoms are all space. There's very little solid matter. With the nucleus of an atom and all the electrons and neutrons, everything rolling around it, it's all space. There's very little matter. So I guess if you hit the right resonant frequency with something, and you get into the resonance of on that atomic level of whatever that structure is, and I guess that happens.
Just like it's proven with two tuning forks. One picks up the resonance of the other. After a while, they both start vibrating at the same frequency.
Exactly. Good analogy.
There are a number of different UFO cases in which an extraterrestrial being is able to alter his or her body in some way and walk through a wall and enter into someone's room coming through a wall, and other cases like that involved with UFOs is fascinating.
Yeah. I just mentioned a few minutes ago about John Hutchinson. He's on the front page of our website. People can click on that YouTube and watch him right from there, and a lot of other interesting things. But John takes different RF fields of energy on different frequencies, and he'll focus them or aim them at an object, and he has to tune them both. When he has them tuned just perfectly right, whoop, it levitates. It becomes independent from its surroundings, and it's just fascinating to watch that.
And Tesla had said too in his notes and his writings from I think 1919 that when he would had a Tesla coil that was attuned to him or at the same frequency, he would be able to generate horsepower in his laboratory.
Wow.
And sometimes he said that he could make flames come out of his head and certain things, and just amaze the people, and just had to do with the being in frequency, being in the right
from the devil.
Oh, I'll tell you.
Just
we
kidding.
live and learn.
Just
you
kidding.
know.
Just kidding.
And about Ralph putting his hand through the top of the disc, and how amazing that feeling must have been. That reminds me of some of the material about the Philadelphia experiment, told how that in the weeks and months following the Philadelphia experiment, the different sailors who had been through that astounding experience about traveling apparently into another dimension in the naval hospital where they were kept, there were times, according to this material, that one of them would get up and just walk into a wall. Their physical body somehow had been altered, and they were able to walk into a wall, and it never came out. And they take the wall apart, and they never find them. They'd apparently gone to a different dimension.
And also with the Hutchison effect, that the fusion of dissimilar materials such as metal and wood was supposed to have happened. And Hutchison did this with 75 watts of power from a 120 volt AC outlet, and he was also able to lift a 60-pound cannonball. And it says for those people that think it's just electrostatic or electromagnetic levitation, then let them try that using just what he did and try to duplicate his experiment. It's more than just that.
Oh yeah, he takes that 75 watts from an AC outlet and converts it to different frequencies.
Yes.
And then aims it at the device. And you can see those bowling balls levitate and everything right on the front page of our website. And of course I change it, frequently. So, and if you get there late and it's already been changed because the show goes around the country, then look up
YouTube. Looking on YouTube.
YouTube, John Hutchinson, and you'll find him. He's there. Okay, fascinating stuff. Now, in the first experiment with the prototype, like you were just saying, Kyle, he could put his hand into it.
Yes.
Now, in the second experiment, I think they raised the frequency a little bit more, and this is interesting what happens. So if you're ready with that clip, let's take a look and find out what happens in the second experiment.
And on the second demonstration of that craft, we were doing the same thing, and it got to a frequency, the whole room was kind of humming. It was just a real loud, it sounded like a bunch of crickets. And like if you've ever noticed a fan blade, the faster it goes, it seems to disappear. You can't see the blades turning anymore. Well, this thing started vibrating, and it started getting blurry to our vision, and then just within a microsecond, the whole thing disappeared. And we asked Carr where it went or what happened, and he said it might be here in a altered or another dimension, another area, or it might wind up on someone's kitchen table while they're having dinner. He didn't really know what, at that point. But that was my exposure to teleportation. And this is one of the things that Tesla had taught him, that you can travel. We live in an eternal now, and we create our realities in nanoseconds. By these cameras we call eyes, the power we have to create our realities are instantaneous, and we live in a world of illusion. And he explained that that time is a concept, a theory, if you will, or a man-made idea that has a beginning and an end to an experience.
Coming up on Kyle.
That in life and beyond,
Or do we open up?
You only have an infinite no beginning and an infinite no end to anything. And when you understand what this is, you can live in an eternal now, realizing that you're creating all the time your environment around you, and this can change momentarily.
To me, it was fascinating that the model becomes etheric. That is, the description about the loud humming sound like a lot of crickets, and then how that the model began to shimmer, and then like highly rotating blades just disappearing, and as though the object went into another dimension, and there was some profound change. It reminded me of the old movie, the original Time Machine movie, and how that the miniature, the model they were watching, that it disappeared. It traveled to another space. That's a fascinating photograph of Tesla.
We get his book shot up? Okay, here it is. Kyle, you want to talk about
A
this?
recent book that I purchased through Barnes & Noble, published by them, is called Tesla, Master of Lightning. And that's one of his incandescent, I think it's incandescent bulb.
Incandescent? Yeah.
Yes, a wireless light bulb, you could say. On the back is another photograph from his research with his Tesla coils and what have you, and you can build a Tesla coil yourself. And it's a very, very interesting book, and it's goes into Tesla's childhood, where he gives credit to his mother for being the inventor in the family, and that's why he went into inventing things himself, and he credits his father, who was a clergyman, for giving he and his sisters and late brother the power to be, or the mental power and ability to be able to memorize entire books, mathematical equations, and what have you. It's a really, it's an easy read. It's written by Margaret Cheney and Robert Uth, UTH, and you can pick it up at Barnes & Noble. Very interesting read, and it's full of illustrations and just a great coffee table book.
And the title is Tesla, Master of Lightning?
Yes, Tesla, Master of Lightning. Recent publication.
I'd like to tell people, if I showed you some of these images tonight, they're all old images, they're in bad shape, but if you go to www.projectcamelot, camelot.org, projectcamelot.org/Ralph _ring, R-I-N-G, .html, you can see all of those images and the whole Ralph Ring / Otis T. Carr story. And
that's a wonderful website, projectcamelot.org.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So I want to, this is only part one. I want to thank Ralph for the interview, and we'll be continuing on with this. This gets more interesting as we go on, folks. So stay tuned for part two. And announcements, I announced this, but some people still aren't aware of it. They're still surprised, but we are in our last season. Our final show will be on March 6th of '09. And I will keep the website up to keep you posted. And that's about all I have for right now. What do you have, Kyle?
The latest issue of UFO magazine, also available at various newsstands. And the cover story talks about Earl Fulford, the late Earl Fulford, and his, I guess his part in the Roswell incident. He was one of the gentlemen that went around and picked up the debris, and he was able to talk about this in his later years before he passed away. It's a very interesting article. Also, very much in this magazine mentions Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, who years ago, when he was asked about, well, are aliens and UFOs and things like that real, he said, I believe they are. But now he's coming out and he left the bombshell on Kerrang radio program, Kerrang exclamation point, where he says to the interviewer, yes, aliens are real, and he's not talking about the ones that come in over the border or anywhere else. Aliens are real. They've been in touch several times, and the governments are covering it up, period. When he was asked about the Roswell, an incident, I believe it may have been the Roswell incident, he says, yes, it's fairly credible. You know, when you have a scientist and famous astronaut such as Edgar Mitchell coming out and saying, aliens are real, the technology is real, then, you know, and it's kind of a, you know, I would think, pay attention, folks. And also, let me see, and that's basically it. On the top, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, they talk about him in this issue and how he is doing research on the different pharmaceutical drugs that possibly now are made with certain resonant frequencies in mind, as mentioned in the Merck manual.
That
some
respond
of them
to certain,
respond to the resonant frequency in a certain way of our cells. And is this being done as part of, I don't know, a mind control thing, or to control us, or to control our DNA? This is very, very excellent article. You know, read it with an open mind, and then come up with your own conclusion. But just don't get a knee-jerk reaction to anything that's strange. You go, oh, that couldn't be real. But
we got a few extra minutes. Ed, tell us what's happening with your book there.
I wanted to mention that the new, revised, updated edition of my book, King of Travelers, Jesus Lost Years
Show it to camera one.
in India.
Tilt it down.
Tilt it down like that.
Yeah.
That the new revised edition of King of Travelers, Jesus Lost Years in India, it's available now at lulu.com, www.lulu.com, and Paul Davids, my friend and colleague, and Paul and I made the movie Jesus in India. We filmed it with our Indian filmmaking team. There were 6 of us. We filmed the movie Jesus in India, which is going to be coming out. I think it's okay for me to say. Paul told me on the phone yesterday, he said that he and his wife just had a wonderful meeting in New York City with the executives of the Sundance cable TV channel, and that it's going to be coming out. Our movie Jesus in India will show December 22nd of this year, 2008.
I'll be tuned in, and we did a show on that here too. You
That's
know.
right, back on February 8th, I think it was.
Yeah,
Yes.
very good, Ed. Yeah. This is exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, while we have probably a minute and a half, something like that, I just mentioned that there is a link on the website on our links page at ufoshows.com from Public Broadcasting. This is Mainstream Science, talking about an asteroid that is the size of the Rose Bowl, is going to pass by Earth close in 2028, and after it goes around the sun and comes back out, it's going to be even closer than that. They say its present projections, projecting in other words, that it's going to come in between our satellite ring, the clock belt of satellites, and the planet itself. That's within 23,000 miles. So if this is really, and this is mainstream science, this isn't conspiracy nuts, this is the real deal. It's a PBS link. You can click on it right here on it. That's how you don't have to zoom in, Judge. They can go to the website, ufoshows.com, and click on it and see the story. There's a lot of very authoritative scientists taking this very seriously, but you know what? The next generation is going to have to solve that problem.
Could I mention one other thing briefly, that for the viewers who might like to find out more information about the movie Jesus in India, that they can go to the website jesusinindiathemovie.com. So that's jesusinindiathemovie.com, and that's with dashes between the words, or they can go to Paul Davids, D-A-V-I-D-S, pauldavids.com, and get information there.
Very good. I guess we're down to a minute. lots of other interesting things on our links page. You can read and hear all the testimony from all the astronauts, all of them that have had UFO experiences. There's another link to what all the presidents knew about UFOs, which is quite interesting. You could actually go there and spend 2 full evenings just on our links page. It's so interesting. And there's one other thing. On our next show, I promise I'll bring this in. We have a link to an area on the south pole of Mars that looks like an ancient reservoir where the ice melt-off would run into. And actually, you don't have to wait for our next show. You can go to that right away just by going to our links page on ufoshows.com. But anyways, I'll bring some of those photos in. They are copyrighted photos. I did get permission to use them, so I will bring them in on our next show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I think I hear the music. I'm not sure. So until next show, until part 2, so long for now, and thanks for watching. Tell a friend. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning in. This has been a great show, and we're out of time, and we've got to go, folks. But remember one thing, you can hear them all on the radio, but here on the Cutting Edge, you actually get to experience them. So long for now. Till next time.